So, Greg, do you remember episode 13 of our illustrious podcast? Do you remember? This is about July 2020. Does that ring a bell?
Was that the episode we did about the Ivana Trump funeral? Right? That was July 2022.
Did we do it? Did we do an episode about that?
Yeah, it was the Ivana Trump funeral fraud. Did we not? Is that not?
Wait, was the funeral a fraud or was the death a fraud?
You just kind of assume if Trump's involved, there's also fraud involved. So I thought, am I?
Yeah, wrong episode.
Not remembering.
That wasn't it. I look forward to recording that episode with you though.
Okay.
No, but not quite right. I have it here. No, episode 13 is called A Plethora of Pandemic PPP Fraud. And the alliteration is intentional because I hate alliteration. However, it's nearly a year later, and we're back with a follow-up episode on PPP fraud because honestly, there's so much goddamn PPP fraud. It just seemed like the right thing to do.
If you'd like to earn CPE credit for listening to this episode, visit earmarkcpe.com. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Continuing education has never been so easy. And now, on to the episode.
This is Oh My Fraud, a true crime podcast where our criminals drive Lamborghinis instead of windowless vans. I'm Caleb Newquist.
And I'm Greg Kyte.
Greg, in our previous PPP fraud episode, we did, if I may say so myself, we did an exceptional job of explaining the Paycheck Protection Program.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on that, Caleb. We did do an exceptional job.
And we actually discussed a couple of pretty spectacular frauds, did we not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do we cover any other kind of fraud other than the spectacular type on Oh My Fraud?
Good point. You're absolutely. That's we only do spectacular frauds.
That's our brand.
That's right.
And if anyone listening doesn't know anything at all about the Paycheck Protection Program or the spectacular frauds we talked about, first off, your head has been buried in the sand. And second of all, you should go back and listen to that episode. Well, we have a link in the show notes to make it extra easy for you.
Yeah. But what I will just reiterate here. Reiterate. That's what I'll do. I will reiterate.
You should iterate it again.
That there was a lot of fraud in the Paycheck Protection Program. We mentioned it in the previous episode, but we'll mention it now. One study ballparked at around $64 billion, which...
So much billions.
Lots of billions. Now, the Small Business Administration, that's the government agency that administered the program, they dispute that figure, but...
Of course they will.
Oh yeah, right.
They're like, oh, you mean the thing we oversaw, $64 billion? That's way overblown. Yeah. You're overblowing it. We're way better at our job than that. No.
What's fantastic though is that agency's inspector general, right? So if you're not familiar with how kind of federal government agencies work, they all have like an inspector general, which is effectively their school marm.
Yeah, it's kind of internal audit, I'd say. It's
very much
akin
so
to governmental internal audit.
Well said, Greg. Anyway, the Inspector General for the SBA estimated that 70,000 loans were potentially fraudulent. And that's also a lot.
Staggering.
Yeah. So, Greg, can you think of anything, and by anything I mean I'm talking about frauds here, that comes close to this in terms of size and scope?
A quick Google search will confirm for you, like it did for me, that Bernie Madoff was the largest single fraud in U.S. history. And like we're saying here, we're talking about at least, estimated 70,000 different frauds. But in that one single fraud, he had right about 37,000 victims who collectively lost, and this is a quote, the victims lost, quote, as much as $20 billion in cash losses and $65 billion in paper losses. So anyways, that being said, PPP fraud, basically, if the $64 billion estimate in the study you quoted is correct, then that's just $1 billion less than the biggest single fraud in U.S. history. And that's what's crazy is
Yeah.
that if the losses on PPP fraud basically equal the losses from the Madoff fraud, but everybody knows who Bernie Madoff is and what happened, and there's the PPP fraud just isn't getting the same kind of splash.
Right. So it's been a while since the PPP loan has ended, and so there's been lots of studies and lots of reporting around it. And in a January 2023 article from NPR did an analysis of Small Business Administration data, and they found that 92% of the loans issued have been granted full or partial forgiveness. So mostly free money.
Yep, it was
the vast majority of which ended up being free money. Okay.
Yep.
Back to the fraud. One study estimated that 15% of PPP loans could be fraudulent, about 1.8 million loans for a total of 76 billion. So we've seen 64 billion, we've seen 76 billion. That's I don't know if that's technically a margin of error of $12 billion, but it's a big difference. And who knows where the $12 billion went. Greg, you didn't get it. I didn't get it.
No.
But the authors of this particular study that I'm citing, and again, we either have them in this show notes or the previous episode show notes. They call that a conservative estimate.
Yeah, which is that's insane. And and it's hard for me to even have much of an opinion about it, whether that's conservative or liberal in terms of that estimate.
Right.
So I mean, my gut wants to say that I would expect better from the general population than 15% of a $800 billion program, that 15% of that was stolen.
Yeah.
That bothers me.
Yeah.
So, and I want to say, I want to believe that humans are better than that.
Yes.
Yeah. But maybe I'm wrong.
I think you are.
I think that's why the fact that humans aren't better than that, that's why we have a podcast, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right.
Yep.
According to the Department of Justice, since the inception of the CARES Act through February 2023, over 200 defendants in more than 130 criminal cases have been prosecuted, and over $78 million in cash proceeds derived from fraudulently obtained PPP funds have been seized, as well as numerous real estate properties and luxury items purchased with such proceeds. Now, we don't know about the real property bit, but $78 million, I would gladly split that with you, Greg. If we had $78 million. But when you compare $78 million to roughly 60 or 70 billion, it's practically nothing.
Yeah, it's basically 1/1000th of the conservative estimate of what was lost.
Yes.
1/1000th of that has been recovered.
Yeah. So not very
good. No.
Okay. So with all that background, let's get into a few more cases of PPP fraud.
All right, Caleb, let's begin with the case of Randy Frasinelli, age 65, of Carnegie, Pennsylvania. And according to the New York Times article, Randy, quote, began his efforts in May of 2020 when he began filing 4 loan applications for the Paycheck Protection Program to help his 4 companies, named Grant Williams Associates, Grant Williams Global, Grant Williams International, and Grant Williams Associates Corporation. So he was very creative with how he named his companies.
Just not even trying that hard.
Yeah. And also so not creative and so just, I mean, all of these just sound like shell companies to me. You know, if it was Grant Williams Heavy Industries Holding Incorporated, that would fit right in there.
Right. Or just like, you know how in the old days, businesses used to be named like very kind of, they had vague names, like even the General Electric Company. And you're like, oh,
right.
Or it's like U.S. Steel. And like, he could have done that. He could have said Grant Williams, I don't know.
Right. General. Well, I always like holdings. Whenever somebody just puts a holdings in there, it's like, yeah, this is just here. We're just saying it's a shell company.
It's holdings. It's holding. It's the job of the purpose of this business is holding.
Is holding things. It's like glue. The Times article goes on to report that Randy described himself on his LinkedIn profile as a high-level technology advisor for advanced technology companies on a global basis, working on the development and release of classified technology products that are developed and sold to major defense contractors and the Defense Department in the U.S., UK, Israel, and other friendly countries across the globe. So, despite the fact that
not dick countries, but the friendly one.
Right, exactly.
Because the U.S. has got such a good track record on people.
Right. I think he was like saying, not North Korea. Listen, we're not
crazy.
Exactly, I'm not an idiot. But so that was his own description of what he does, and despite the fact that it's rather meaningless and also highly suspicious, and in response to these loans, the two banks to which Mr. Frasinelli applied for loans, they gave him combined approximately $2.5 million. So they're
fantastic.
They were just like, yeah, here's the money, go.
Here you go. Grant Williams Associates, Grant Williams Global, Grant Williams International.
Right. Yeah, the Grant Williams quadruplets. Here's your $2.5 million. Go and save your businesses.
With friendly countries, of course.
With friendly countries, exactly. So here's a great. I love this timeline of what unfolds from this point on. So here's what happens.
Awesome.
And like we said, just to ground us again, he began his efforts in May of 2020. On February 4th, 2021, authorities searched Randy's home and seized 4 bank accounts that he had put on his applications for these PPP loans. Then, on March 2nd, 2021, less than a month later, the dude applies for another PPP loan.
Awesome.
On March 13th, 11 days after that, he's approved for that 5th loan and given another $1.3 million after the authorities already seized a bunch of his bank accounts. Then on April 14th, which is basically 1 month later,
another month later,
Randy's arrested and charged with bank fraud and money laundering, and he's released on bond. And this bond, which is so ridiculous, the bond includes a condition that he, quote, not commit any federal, state, or local crimes. It's not a big ask if you're being let go on bond, right? It seems like, no, I think all of us live under the conditions to not commit any federal, state. It's like, well, if you commit a crime, we're going to take you to jail. Yeah, no shit you're going to do. Oh, anyways, then May 21st, barely a month after that, the dude applies for another PPP loan, this time for a little bit over $500,000. So the guy just wants all the money and doesn't care. He has zero cares of all as the walls are crumbling around him, he's just going and applying for more loans. So investigators,
it is a very straightforward application, Greg.
Right. Well, I guess. Well, and we'll get to that, how straightforward it is at the end of the podcast. But here's the deal. Investigators learned that he'd applied for the 6th loan, the one for about $500,000. They learned that he applied for that loan about a month later when they searched open source data on the SBA's website, and the loan had been tentatively approved. And because of that, because he'd applied for this last loan, he was then arrested again because he'd broken the conditions of his bond not to commit federal crimes. So they arrested him and charged him with they just tacked on another count of bank fraud along with the other frauds that he had already been charged with.
This might be my favorite PPP fraud so far.
It absolutely.
I've read a lot of PPP fraud stories, but
right.
I mean, this one's pretty good. Pretty good.
What's a good? It's like you're being arrested for shoplifting, and you steal the pen off the judge's desk.
Yeah,
as at the courtroom, and it's like, okay, there's something wrong with you at that point. According to the Justice Department press release, Razzanelli spent the money on luxury items, including vehicles, a villa in Mexico, an African safari, firearms, works of art, precious metals, watches, and personal investments, which I think we would all say very respectable loot for like a gym bro. I'm going to say for a guy who likes to blast his glutes on leg day.
Always the watches. Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
Watches.
But also, if the firearms seem that kind of stood out to me. But then you remember his LinkedIn profile. The dude's an arms dealer, so it seems like that's maybe just building his.
Oh, was that the subtext that you got
brand.
from that?
Yeah,
it was arms dealer.
Yeah, well, it's just like you can't. You got to be true to your calling if you're an arms dealer. If you don't. If you're an arms dealer and you don't own an automatic weapon or several, then I don't believe you're an arms dealer.
Yeah. Stand behind your product.
Exactly. Believe in what you do. So then, August 16th, 2022, Randy Frazzanelli pleaded guilty to charges of bank fraud and money laundering. But listen, my favorite part comes next, because according to the Department of Justice press release prior to sentencing, in March of 2023, Randy Frazzanelli submitted at least 13 forged character letters purportedly from prominent individuals in politics, finance, business, technology, and even charitable organizations in an attempt to receive a more lenient sentence. Brilliant.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I really... I have to confess, I did not get a chance to look up the court filings because I was curious that maybe they mentioned who these forged character letters were from.
Right.
But I didn't get there. But in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, Warren Buffett, right? Like he got Warren. He got one from Warren Buffett.
Bill Clinton, Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Mother Teresa. They're all they can all vouch for me.
The late Mother Teresa.
Yeah. She wrote this letter before she passed, just because she knew I might need it. United States District Judge W. Scott Hardy was not impressed by the forged letter and sentenced Randy to
letters, Greg, not just one.
Right. Did I not
a
say
baker's
letters?
dozen? No, you said letter.
Oh.
There's a baker's dozen of forged letters.
So, yeah, well, he wasn't, there wasn't, what I'm trying to underscore, he wasn't impressed with even a one of them. and he sentenced Randy to 78 months in prison.
In November 2020, 7 people across 2 states were charged in a PPP scheme that involved filing 80 falsified applications for $16 million. That is not a bad figure as far as a single PPP fraud goes.
No, that's a lot.
And how many people did I say?
It was 7 people.
I mean, that's a good sized conspiracy. I don't know about you, but people entering a conspiracy with more than one other person, those are some balls, my friend.
Yeah.
Someone is going to talk. I don't it's only a matter of time. If we've learned anything from anything, conspiracies will fucking
implode.
They
will absolutely implode.
With the even the mafia, right?
Yeah.
When you think about the mafia, and take your pick. Take your particular flavor of organized crime. They'll kill you if you talk, and it still doesn't stop people from talking.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing you got to realize is we've harped on the effectiveness of separation of duties as a internal control. That whole internal control is based on the presumption that a group of people will not want to commit fraud together. That's the whole That's the whole point of that. So yeah, it's a pretty decent side. It's 7 is a lot of conspirators.
That's a good size accounting department.
Very healthy.
Yeah. Okay. All 7 were charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and wire fraud, our favorite kind of fraud.
Yep.
2 of them were also charged with money laundering. In the Department of Justice press release announcing the charges, there are a lot of quotes. And this is, I had to point this out, but I count one from the acting assistant attorney general, one from the U.S. attorney, along with quotes from special agents from the inspector general's offices of the Small Business Administration, Homeland Security Investigations, Federal Housing Finance Agency, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. Now, It isn't clear to me why so many different people wanted to get their name in the paper for this one, but there you go. Seven different bureaucrats quoted, or law enforcement officials. I don't know. Do you have a collective noun for bureaucrats, or is there a?
I'm so jaded about anyone who's in politics. I would just say ass bags. Is it ass bags?
But they're bureaucrats. It's different. They're not elected officials.
That's true. So
these are public servants, Greg.
Oh, okay. That's what I meant by ass bags. Was public service. And I do think it's nice there's a one-to-one.
A Congress of ass bags.
A Congress of ass bags, exactly. Then it's nice that there's a one-to-one correlation between the number of those in the Congress of ass bags and the conspirators. So for each person involved, there was some mucky muck that decided that they had to chime in on their disgust of what's happening in American society.
That's right. Well, for what it's worth, I'm not so cynical about people that have decided to commit their lives to public service. So, Greg, I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree.
Yeah.
All right. So how'd they do it? According to the press release, they, quote, conspired to submit more than 80 fraudulent PPP loan applications by falsifying the number of employees and the average monthly payroll expenses of the applicant businesses. In support of these fraudulent loan applications, they conspired to submit and did submit fraudulent bank records and or fake federal tax forms, according to the charges. Some of the PPP loan applications were allegedly submitted on behalf of companies the defendants controlled.
Which is bonkers, because having applied for these loans, of course that's how you would do it, is you say, we got tons of employees and we pay them tons of money. But I remember going through that and they were like, you have to match up your 941s that you submitted to the federal government to back up how much these people are being paid. And to me, it never even crossed my mind to go, oh, it'd be really easy just to make a fake 941 that matches how much I'm claiming on this, because I was going, of course the government is the first thing they're going to do is match up the 941 with what they're going to. And then in hindsight, I go, no, why would they have had me submit the 941s that I already gave to them if they were going to go to the work of matching them up? So it's like, oh, geez, this was not thought through very well.
Not really. No. Let's continue, because there's more. Other loan applications were submitted on behalf of entities that third parties allegedly owned, according to the indictment. In exchange for these, several of the defendants received large kickbacks. Naturally.
Makes
the
sense.
indictment further alleges the defendants laundered a portion of the fraudulent proceeds by writing checks from companies that received PPP loans to fake employees. Those that received checks included some of the defendants and their relatives.
Brilliant.
Yep. The fake paychecks were then allegedly cashed at a check cashing company owned by one of the people charged.
Right, by one of the defendants.
One of the defendants.
Yeah.
The indictment alleges over 1,100 fake paychecks totaling more than $3 million in fraudulent PPP loan proceeds were cashed at this cash checking company.
At this one cash checking place.
This one cash checking
that was
place.
owned by one of the perps.
That's right.
Brilliant. Genius.
Federal agents also executed 45 seizure warrants in conjunction with the case. Some of the items include a Porsche and a Lamborghini.
There it
allegedly purchased with the obtained funds. I'm sorry that was so long, but I really had a hard time. Well, obviously I had a hard time. I didn't cut any of it out. I felt like I had to share all of that.
No, because you got to know how they did how did they do the deed?
Well, okay, 1,100 paychecks. Okay, think about if we can just take a little break here from the action.
Yeah.
Okay. How many people work in your company?
We've got 4 people that work.
Okay, and how often do you run payroll? Do you run it every other week or twice a month?
Bi-weekly, yeah.
Okay, so that means 26 paychecks for 4 people
per year.
Per year,
about 100.
So about 100.
Yeah.
They did more than 10. More than 10 times that.
Yeah. Which again, but that's just the ones that were cashed at this one specific place. That wasn't all the paychecks. Because I'm looking at that and I'm going, yeah, if you're, because again, the way that you perpetrate this fraud is you say, oh, we've got a bazillion employees. And so, yeah, you have to pay them their pay. I mean, if they're fake employees and you're really trying to have this paper trail, you're going to cut paychecks to your fake employees. But yeah, it's going to have to be way more than if you had 40 people that you're employing for a year. It's going to have to be, a ton. But it's just so, again, ballsy that they were just like, where can I cash these? Oh, that's right. I own a business that does that. Let's just do that right here. Keep it in house. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. But we're not done. In December 2021, over a year later from the first indictment that we talked about, or the first press release we were just reading from, another indictment was unsealed that charged 4 more people in this conspiracy. And according to that press release that was issued at the time, they had a total of 15 dependents. Dependents?
Yeah, because they're also
filing tax
committing
returns.
fraud on the child
fraud.
tax credit. So you got to have 15 dependents for that.
So yes, 15 defendants, and they conspired to obtain a total of $35 million in PPP loan. And they actually obtained, of that $35 million, they got $18 million in proceeds. So
about half of what they applied for.
Half of what they applied for.
Crazy.
Not bad.
Nope.
Not bad at all.
That $18 million is still a lot of bucks.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what to make of this next part, Greg, but one of the defendants, despite the feds undoubtedly having a mountain of evidence, his name is Abdul Fatani, and he's of Richmond, Texas. He did not plead guilty like everyone else.
Oh.
He was convicted by a federal jury in February of 2023, and which I guess, why not, I guess. Maybe he was the ringleader. It wasn't clear to me why this person went to trial. Maybe everyone flipped. Maybe they said he was the ringleader. Whatever. It wasn't made clear.
Maybe he just had lots of self-confidence.
Maybe. Anyway, from that press release, it says, Fatani distributed over $500,000 in fraudulent loan proceeds to his co-conspirators and himself using bogus payroll checks and laundered a portion of the proceeds by transferring the funds from one of his bank accounts to another bank account he controlled. Fatani was convicted of 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 1 count of wire fraud, and 1 count of unlawful monetary transactions, i.e. money laundering.
Yep.
He is scheduled to be sentenced on May 8th and faces a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison for conspiracy and 10 years for the money laundering. And he hadn't, at the time of this recording, he hadn't been sentenced, but not looking good, my friend.
Nope.
Not looking good.
When you can get up to 30 years, that's a lot of years for financial fraud.
For just some fucking money.
Yep.
But Greg, what is remarkable? $35 million. 35 million is the biggest PPP fraud that I found.
Okay.
Until I found a couple more cases.
Oh, okay.
Bigger than that one.
That was those were that was the bar to beat, and then you beat it a couple times.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so here we go. A woman in West New York who submitted at least 153 fraudulent PPP applications seeking a total of approximately $43.8 million on behalf of at least 111 entities.
Jeez.
God, that must have been a ton of work.
So much.
Amanda J. Gloria pleaded guilty in April 2022. I could not find any sentencing info for her, so maybe she's still waiting it out.
Maybe.
She went for over $40 million. So
That's weird, because I was going to say maybe they're still trying to sort stuff out, but if she pleaded guilty, I think they just kind of go, okay, and cut, and then they go to sentencing. So that's interesting.
A man in Encino, California, who submitted 27 PPP loan applications to 4 banks between April and June 2020, seeking $27 million. Robert Benlevy was convicted of bank fraud, false statements to a financial institution, and money laundering in March 2022. He was sentenced to 135 months, more than 11 years.
Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah. Which I think, I want to say that I mean, these sentencing, because like we were saying, for the for the guy before, the Abdul Fatani, facing up to 30 years, and then this guy Ben Levy getting 11 years.
11?
We usually are seeing prison sentences of a lot less than that for this kind of white collar crime. But I guess my knee jerk reaction to that is it just looks like probably the judges involved in sentencing are just like pissed off like the rest of us that people would abuse money that was out there to help honest, hardworking American citizens survive the weirdest fucking thing that any of us been through in our lives.
That we all made the weirdest thing we'll ever experience, probably.
Hopefully, please.
God, I shouldn't say shit like that.
Right, you just jinxed it.
What the fuck did I just
The next
do?
one's on you. That's your fault.
Okay. But yeah, I think it's telling that there are so many frauds that are in this multi-millions of dollars. In these three cases, in the tens of millions of dollars. And here's the thing. They weren't even trying that hard to conceal the fraud.
Nope.
These businesses didn't have employees. They weren't really trying to wash the money either.
Yeah.
At least not in a way that would actually work. Right?
Exactly.
They were just cutting checks to fake people. If these people aren't Marty Bird, Greg.
No. Marty Bird, they were not. So if you haven't figured it out yet, I think you get the picture of just how widespread the PPP fraud has been over the last 3 years. But just in case you just can't get enough of this, kind of like we can't, here's a couple of other stories that we'll just mention because they're notable. In May of 2022, the Department of Justice announced that Don V. Cisternino had been extradited from Croatia to face charges stemming from a fraudulently obtained PPP loan for $7.2 million. The press release says that Cisternino's PPP loan application claimed that Cisternino's New York businesses Magnifico, A+ on the name.
Nice word.
New York, because it's Magnifico. Listen, okay, so as delightful as that is, just keep listening.
Yeah.
That company had 441 employees and monthly payroll expenses in 2019 of more than $2.8 million. But in truth, Magnifico had few, if any, employees, other than Cisternino himself and his girlfriend. So he said 441 when in reality was like 2 or less.
Right. And by the way, just because I was curious, if you have 441 employees and your payroll expenses is about $2.8 million.
What's the monthly?
About $6,300.
That's nice. He's paying his people well. He's a hero. He's a hero of the working man.
Certainly.
That's. I love that you crunched that number. That makes me so happy.
God.
So okay, but then on top of that, so that's what he was claiming was $2.8 million per month. But Magnifico did not report any wages to the IRS in 2019. But in support of his PPP loan, Cisternino submitted false W-2s for Magnifico's purported employees, many of which listed the names and social security numbers of actual people, but these people were not Magnifico employees, and these people had not authorized Cisternino to use their identities. So clearly, there's not just PPP loan fraud, but also identity theft going on with this $7.2 million fraud. But then, on top of that, Donnie Cisternino's loot, he used those funds to purchase a Lincoln Navigator, a Maserati, a Mercedes-Benz, and approximately 12,579 square foot residence in Seminole County, Florida, and it's a hell of a house. I know that podcasts are not visual media, but there was a picture of this house that was included in the press release.
There was.
And we've linked to it in the show notes. And this huge compound.
It's a compound.
It's like this.
Right? It looks like a compound.
Yeah. It's a humongous thing. Looks like a big ass barn. It's got a tennis court. It's got a huge swimming pool, and there's other structures as well as that. It's a nice spread, and all obtained with certified fraudulent funds.
Yeah.
So then the kicker is January 2023, Sister Nina was sentenced to 8 years and 6 months in prison. Again, another heavy sentence for the few people who got caught with their hand in the PPP cookie jar. Okay, one more fraud of note. In May 2021, ProPublica reported that more than 300 PPP loans had been made to fake companies, most of which were claiming to be farms, and they had names like Ritter Wheat Club, Dealy Nuts, and Beefy King. Listen, if I start a farm and I don't name it either Dealy Nuts or Beefy King, Caleb, you can come punch me in the head, because those are the best names I've ever heard for a farm. All of these 300 loans were obtained through Kabbage, an online lender, which Kabbage, they processed over 300,000 PPP loans before the first round of funds ran out. Caleb, that's bonkers.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that everybody was talking about when this was going down is that, and it like people, there was people who were at a grave disadvantage to get PPP loans, and it was those people who did not already have a close relationship with any kind of bank. Friggin' Kabbage was an option. Just go online and get your loan through Kabbage. I don't even remember hearing that. This was very surprising to me that they were even a PPP loan option.
Yeah, I think the fintechs, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the fintechs were overall slightly problematic in certain ways.
Yeah.
And this appears to be one instance where that was the case.
Absolutely. So, just also, those three companies that I mentioned, the Ritter Wheat Club, Dealy Nuts, and Beefy King.
Beefy King?
Each of them claimed to have how many employees? One employee. And
nice.
which again, huh? I mean, I guess if you got an employee, you can claim a loan, and if you're claiming 300, then maybe it's going to add up. But that's weird to me, that if you're going to commit the fraud, that you're going to do it like that. But here's the other thing: all of those companies claimed that they were located on the New Jersey coast, and so when investigators called the guy who lived at one of the addresses that listed, it was the mayor of the town. And the mayor is quoted in the article as saying, "There's no farming here. We're a sandbar, for Christ's sake." So again, this wasn't, can you call that identity theft? It's more like they looked through a phone book and just started picking random addresses to put.
Yeah, you have to wonder, right? Where, so what it appears that they did, whoever perpetrated this particular fraud is like, they just came up with 300 random addresses,
right?
And it's funny because that ProPublica article, they even have like a heat map of where the frauds were located, and like the Jersey Shore, where these three were located, like the Jersey Shore, there was a high concentration there, and it's not exactly a hotbed of agriculture.
Right. Clearly. Yeah.
Right.
It's
a sandbar, for Christ's sake.
It's a sandy beach. We don't grow much on the sandy beach. The article goes on to report that there was also an anesthesiologist in Hartington, Nebraska, who did obtain a legit PPP loan for his anesthesia business, but then he was approved for another one, only this time it was for a potato farm. And guess what the anesthesiologist's side gig was not? It was not potato farming. So, of course, he didn't know anything about the second loan. And another one of these was a president of the local bank, also in Hardington, Nebraska, and he was approved for a PPP loan that he knew nothing about, and the business listed for him was Strawberry Farmer.
I think it's worth noting that in the midst of and the aftermath of all this fraud, a congressional committee decided to investigate why this was all happening. And it's no surprise that this came about due to this kind of onslaught of reporting exposing pandemic aid fraud. Now, you mentioned earlier, Greg, that if you ballpark PPP fraud in the 60 to 70 billion range, that makes it as big as Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. And Bernie Madoff, that particular fraud generated a lot of attention and press. And by comparison, I would say PPP fraud has not generated that level of attention or press, but there has been quite a bit of reporting around this. Very good reporting, actually. I mean, we rely on it to do these podcasts, so it's not nothing.
No,
but that's what kind of got this committee to jump into action, because they're reading the news and they're just like, geez Louise, this thing we did, a lot of fraud.
Right. Well, if you want to think about the victims of this fraud, because like we were saying, there was just almost exactly 37,000 victims of the Bernie Madoff fraud. The victims of the PPP fraud are every taxpayer in the United States.
Everybody else. Yep.
Yeah. So there's constituents out there that are going to be pissed off at the people who did not give proper oversight to the PPP loan process.
Yeah. So in December 2022, the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis released its 130-page report after an 18-month investigation. And according to the New York Times, the report was, quote, packed with startling details about how negligible government oversight and a rush to get cash out the door to help devastated businesses created conditions ripe for fraud. Some non-bank financial technology companies, known as fintechs, exploited those gaps to collect outsized profits, which they maximized by ignoring typical lending safeguards and at times by outright flouting the government aid program's rules.
Exactly, because the bankers were supposed to be part of the backstop of this whole program. But if the bankers are like, I mean, again, bankers, well, and you're going to get to this, the banks were incentivized to get out as many loans as they possibly could.
Yep. Now, maybe a little bit of a tangent here, but like, I would say legacy banks, and maybe this won't make the final cut, but legacy banks, the brick and mortar types. One of the things that has kind of came up in the midst of all this was like people were underbanked. There were plenty of people who were underbanked that had businesses but didn't get a loan. They had businesses who needed money, but they couldn't get a loan because they were underbanked. They didn't have banking relationships. Yeah. So naturally, fintechs kind of would step in and say, oh, we can solve this problem for you because we can lend you money, or we can help you obtain the money.
Which seems very noble. It seems like very noble of them.
Indeed. Absolutely. Absolutely. However, what these fintechs do not probably have are the kind of legacy infrastructure that your average brick and mortar bank has. Yeah. And banks are highly regulated businesses.
Yeah.
Right. So they do things. I don't want to say they do things by the book, because banks have gotten in plenty of trouble doing things not by the book. Yeah. But in something like this, where you're just talking about small business loans, it's pretty cut and dried, wouldn't you say? Or am I wrong about that?
Well, no, you're absolutely right. Because again, with your like you said, the legacy banks, they all have an army of bespectacled thin glass wearing compliance officers. It's
basically me. People that look like me.
People that look like you, just like it, but in like a short sleeve button up with a tie. Yes. People like that, who their entire job is to go, well, I don't think we can actually do that. They didn't have that army within the fintech companies.
Right. Now, this House Select Subcommittee report was highly critical of two companies in particular that helped lots of businesses obtain PPP loans. The first one is called Womply,
Fake.
and the second one is called Blue Acorn.
It's not the company that you can they'll send you boxes of food that you can
Yeah,
prepare.
I think that's it. Yeah.
We're hoping they'll be a sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blue Acorn.
Yeah. Oh, Blue Apron. Yeah. Okay. Acorn.
Close.
Yeah.
It's like one letter off, right?
Pretty much.
Pretty much. Anyway, so yeah, Womply and Blue Acorn. Both companies developed ways to help lenders facilitate PPP applications at a massive scale and did little to discern between legitimate applications and those that were potentially fraudulent. The Times reported that Womply earned more than $2 billion in fees and Blue Acorn earned more than $1 billion. The New York Times investigation, a separate New York Times investigation found that between the two companies, they facilitated 1/3 of the PPP loans in 2021. That's
now let me just
add of loans.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I didn't mean to step on your toes.
No, but I'm just saying, like, for those two companies to do 1/3 of the loans in 2021, which is like the height of the pandemic,
yeah,
bonkers,
mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But here's where my brain went was that it said that they didn't do enough to identify the applicants that were potentially fraudulent. But here's the problem with fintech companies is that I guess this is just my understanding of them, is that there's not the relationship. They've automated stuff. They put it online. It's very much it's very transactional, not relational. Traditional banks, possibly to their fault, are very they're relationship heavy. Is what those banks are. Again, I have a very close relationship and have my entire career that I've had at my current job. I've had a real tight relationship with our company's banker at Zion's First National Bank. And I know the guy. I can text him even after banking hours and the guy will get back to me. At a fintech company, I don't like that guy, my guy. He's who gave me the loan, and he could easily, if I asked for $10 million, he'd be like, "Hey, Greg, what the hell?" But for these fintech companies, they don't know. There's not that relationship. So right. I think it'd be much more difficult for them to even possibly sniff out what's potentially fraudulent than just a traditional bank would.
I think you're making a fine point, Greg.
Thank you.
So things went sideways when some of Womply and Blue Womply?
I can't get over that name. Womply. That's a that's a tech bro name. Hey, what should we name our bank? You know, it'd be hilarious. Let's call it Womply.
Womp womp. So, like I said, things kind of went sideways when some of Womply and Blue Acorn's lending partners started to express concerns about their practices. Now, I invite you to read this entire New York Times article because it's very good, but there are a couple of highlights that they pulled from the Select Committee's report, which, by the way, I didn't know if you had time to check this, Greg, but that report is no longer available, and the committee's website is no longer available.
Oh.
And my hunch is that it is because Congress is no longer controlled by Democrats, it's controlled by Republicans, and they just decided to scrap all the work. So I would be happy. I would be in your debt to anyone who dug up a copy of that report and sent it to us, because I looked everywhere and I could not find it.
Huh. That's wild. Usually, I mean, people can delete tweets 5 years ago and somebody still has a screenshot.
Well, and I went to Twitter, to the committee's web, because the committee's Twitter account is still up.
Oh.
And the tweets are all still there.
Okay.
But when I would click on the links to the report,
404 not found.
Take me to the site not found. Yeah.
Wow.
So anyway.
Wow, that's ominous.
So, a couple things that the Times noted of. The House report stated that Blue Acorn transferred $300 million to its owners and spent $666 million with a marketing company controlled by its senior leadership.
Nice. 666 at anything is that's ringing a bell.
Yeah. It gets, even though I'm not a religious person, it still gets my attention.
Yep.
And I'll just remind everyone, Blue Acorn got about $1 billion in fees, and that accounts for about 966 million of that 1 billion.
Wow. Oof.
Yeah. Wampley got 5 million in loans from its largest lending partner, Harvest Small Business Finance, and when the company tried to get it forgiven, the SBA said, "Nope."
Nice.
So Wampley was in that 8% of loans not forgiven, I guess.
Which is weird because you'd think, I mean, just in terms of the rules, you'd think that they could get a decent chunk of that forgiven.
Yeah.
So the SBA just like stiff arming them. They were stiff arming them with the middle finger, and appropriately so, clearly.
Yeah. The CEO of one of Wampley's lending partners, Chris Hearn of Fountainhead Capital, he even had to take out a restraining order against Wampley to prevent the company from destroying documents it had on Fountainhead's loans.
Nice.
Hearn told the committee's investigators that, quote, Wampley's fraud detection systems seem to have been put together with duct tape and gum. So, Greg, did we learn anything this time?
Yeah, we did. And I think a lot of the stuff that I learned, unfortunately, I don't think is particularly practicable. Like there's not a lot you can do with it, but it's still learning that I think is good to get in your brain. The first one, this has come up in my mind a lot, is that governmental crisis aid is one of those things that's very much under the umbrella of damned if you do, damned if you don't for politicians. And what I mean by that is this, is since it was and you even alluded to this in some of the stuff you said, is that politicians were under the gun to get critically needed money to businesses that were drowning. And so there was a choice. I don't know if anybody felt like it was a choice, but there was a choice that had to be made of, do we roll this out slowly with enough safeguards to minimize the opportunity for fraud? Or do we get it out quickly just so that we can for sure help the people that need to be helped? And if fraudsters take advantage of it, that's just the price that we have to pay to get this stuff to the people who need it fast enough. And the damned if you do, damned if you don't thing is, and obviously they took the latter of those two options where they got it out quickly, and the stage was set for people to again steal somewhere between 10% and 15% of all the money that was given out. But yeah, you're gonna get run up the pole if you get stuff out too fast and fraud happened. But you're probably gonna get the option is that you don't roll things out in a quick manner, and there's lots of people innocent people who don't get the help that they need, and they end up suffering. So
they suffer. Yep. Yeah.
So I really think that this type of fraud, again, it's kind of like, it reminds me of businesses like particularly in the retail space, where they actually in their budgets, they budget for shoplifting. Where they go, okay, approximately this much of our inventory is just going to get stolen. So we just have, as much as we hate it, we just have to take it on the chin and put that into our financial models for our company. And I think the same thing is the case with, again, emergency federal funds, where they've got to go, okay, there's bad people out there who are going to take advantage of this, and we just have to realize that's the thing. Now, that nobody's gonna, I don't ever hear anybody saying that on the news, where it's like, hey, we decided to let this be something that fraudsters could have a heyday on, but that's because we care about you, taxpayer, because that just doesn't fly. But it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yes, we're going to mortgage your children's future so that people don't run out into the streets in a crazed panic.
Right.
And I get it. I
get
it. The in the show notes, there's an NPR article. I think I mentioned it a couple of times throughout the episode, but it talks about this very thing.
Yeah.
And it talks to people from the Trump administration, it talks to people from the Biden administration. And it is like, I think you will find that the political, the political calculus for both landed on, we helped a lot of people who needed help.
Yeah.
And full stop. Like, they don't really want to talk about the fraud because the fraud
Right.
is pretty, the fraud is huge. The scope is ridiculous. But
Yeah.
the other side of that coin is what you just talked about, which is they helped millions upon millions of businesses and people maintain their livelihoods. So,
Yeah. So I guess,
but we still have a podcast episode. We have 2 now. So like,
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Well, and maybe the practicable part of that whole thing is I don't want to become a politician. Because I would hate having that kind of decision to make. Especially again with my accounting brain, I'd probably get so caught up on the risks involved in the potential fraud that I might freeze and be like, no, I don't know, and be ineffective. So, yeah, there you go. So lesson number 1: don't let Greg go into politics. Here's the second lesson that I learned, and I alluded to this earlier, and that is that the PPP application process, like I said. From where I sat, it was complex and it was onerous, but that's because I was trying to play by the rules. I learned that compliance is so much easier for people who don't give a shit about the rules and are just trying to take advantage of the system. So much easier for them than for the rest of us. Because like I said, I got 2 PPP loans. The math I had to do was so much simpler than most other companies, but it still felt like it was just this burden on me to make sure that I checked all the boxes and I did all the right things. And like I said, especially when the rules kept changing, and I eventually was just like, I'm just not going to do anything until they finalize the rules. I'm going to stop doing a lot of this math to see if I'm in compliance until they finally say, here's what we did. And then I go, okay, here's what I did. And here's where it falls. But like I said, if you're stealing all that, it's like all that stuff be damned. You just fill out your forms and collect your money and disappear. So So I guess that what did I really learn? I really learned that the brain damage that the accounting profession experienced was probably largely not felt by the fraud committing industry of the United States of America.
Right.
Again, not very practicable, but it was definitely a light bulb of just going, yeah, these guys didn't care. And again, we're looking that 99.9% of the fraud probably got away with it. They got to keep their money. And that's what kind of makes your heart sink.
Well, one thing that maybe will lift your spirits ever so slightly is that they have extended the prosecution window for 10 years to from the end of the program. So the statute of limitations, I believe, is much longer. They codified it. They passed it into law. So I don't remember the exact details, but they made a point to say it's like, oh, we reserve the right to come after you for another decade. So,
gotcha. So you're basically saying that we have
10 years of podcast material ahead of us.
We've got eight more follow-up episodes of what happened this year on the PPP fraud.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
There you go.
All right.
Okay, that's it for this episode. And remember, the U.S. government has the worst internal controls, or maybe it's external controls. So if you're going to steal money, maybe you should try stealing it from the federal government. Just saying.
And also remember that you are a good person, so don't steal from the U.S. government despite their lack of internal controls or external controls. Whatever.
Or whatever. If you want to drop us a line, please do. We'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com. We receive quite a generous amount of email from folks, and a lot of our episodes have been birthed from the ideas that you guys send us. So we'd love to hear from you, especially if you've got a favorite fraud that you haven't heard us talk about yet. Drop us a line and let us know what that is. Caleb, if people want to talk to you, but they want to keep me out of it, where can they find you out there in the ether?
If they want to keep you out of it.
Yeah.
I'm on Twitter. One of these days I'm going to stop saying that I'm on Twitter.
Yeah,
Are we there yet?
I have a Twitter
there yet?
account. Have I gone on it in the last 3 weeks? Maybe not.
I am on Twitter at @CNewquist and LinkedIn, my full name, /Caleb Newquist. Greg, I bet you're on LinkedIn at least.
I am. Well, I'm on both. I'm on Twitter at Greg Kyte. I'm on LinkedIn, just Greg Kyte CPA. You can search for me at that. Yeah, or if you or ideally send an email to ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com.
Yeah. Oh My Fraud is written by Greg Kyte and myself. Our producer is Zach Frank. If you like the show, leave us a review and share with a friend. Rating the show and leaving reviews helps people find the podcast. And also subscribe on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Amazon. I don't know, wherever you listen to podcasts. Where do people listen to podcasts? It's Apple, mostly.
Is it iHeartRadio?
iHeartRadio. It's another one. Wherever you get podcasts. If you're an accountant, listen on Earmark. Get some CPE.
It's so easy.
The best.
Yeah.
Join us next time for more avarice, swindlers, and scams from stories that will make you say,
Oh, my fraud.
"Oh, my fraud."